good friend I've known way back in the day when we were working at the Michigan Daily together. Back in the late 80s. He is from the worldwide leader in sports on every single one of their NFL and Sports Center platforms, Adam Schefter. How are you, Shefty?
Rich, Happy New Year. How are you?
Same to you too, sir. Same to you too. What do you know right now what's going on in Houston? Anybody saying anything about the future of Los Angeles that we can hang our hat on?
You know, the one thing I've always expected, I never thought that the Raiders were going to be in the conversation to move. I know they're aligned with the Chargers contractually. They have that agreement between Dean Spanos and Mark Davis. I just never have bought into the fact that the Raiders somehow would find their way to L.A. in 2016. I do think that we'll get an answer here in the next 24 to 48 hours. By this time tomorrow, I would think we'd have something. I think that they're going through. I think the NFL is doing what it's doing and trying to rally up the support, and you know that when they get out of there, they'll say it's unanimous, that so-and-so is moving to L.A.
Right.
Only it's not so unanimous, but that's how it'll be presented when they get out of that room. And somehow, some way, even though Dean Spanos doesn't trust Stan Kroenke, I have to believe that they're going to find a way to get those two together and get those two franchises to L.A. somehow, some way.
Yeah, with something that Dean Spanos can feel like he's an equal partner with somebody who's already. I mean, anybody who flies into Los Angeles has to look either out of the right or the left side of their plane, and they see this big, huge patch of dirt where Hollywood Park Racetrack used to be, and that's the stadium, where it's either going to be built or it's not for Stan Kroenke.
Well, let me ask you this question.
Yes.
If you are the Chargers or you are the Rams, how can you conceivably return to your city next year?
Well, you can't. I mean, it's interesting you leave the Raiders out because Mark Davis appeared at some public forums. And out of all of the applications, out of all three, I hadn't seen the Raiders made public. I've seen the other ones made public.
I don't think the Rams can go back to St. Louis.
No.
I don't know how they do go back to St. Louis after that application. I don't know how the Chargers go back to San Diego. And I guess that's why I just believe in the end. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how it gets done.
Right.
But I believe that somehow Roger Goodell finds a way to get the Rams and the Chargers aligned and in Los Angeles some way.
Adam Schefter joining me here. What have you heard about what was said on the turf with Joey Porter out there? Have you heard anything about?
No. You know, I remember back in the day, the late, great Derek Thomas, I was covering a Monday Night Football game, and it was a game that actually led to ultimately Marty Schottenheimer's demise in Kansas City. And on one drive, the Chiefs got about 7 personal fouls in a game in which the Broncos blew them out. And multiple penalties were on Derek Thomas at the line of scrimmage with Shannon Sharpe. And I was able to confirm it later on. I had been hearing it all along. But essentially, on first down, Shannon Sharpe would go to him 8-1-6. And on second down, he would go 3-3-3. And on third down, he would go 4-4-4, which were the digits of Derek Thomas's girlfriend at the time, which enraged him. And I don't know what was said the other night with Joey Porter, but I will say this. Joey Porter went to Colorado State that time back in the day when I worked in the Rocky Mountain News. Joey Porter always has been like that. That's who Joey Porter is.
Yeah, I know, and obviously we take a look at what Vontaze Burfict does on the field and Adam Jones does on the field and use their past as a prism through which to look at what we saw on the field. And Joey Porter may have been out there just chatting with Antonio Brown or trying to check on him. And then as Burfict may have said something to Brown as he's walking off the field and Porter turns around and says something to him and gets bumped by Wallace Gilberry and all of that, we understand. But his past, too, I mean, Adam, you and I worked that Super Bowl together for the NFL Network between Seattle and Pittsburgh. And as soon as he got off the plane, in Detroit, he was all over Jeremy Stevens and talking about him in the media. Because that's the one guy who could have gone off and gotten all of those 15-yard flags in the Super Bowl.
And this has always been his history, so I'm sure he was concerned about Antonio Brown, and that is, I'm sure, the explanation that Joey Porter and the Steelers will use, that you're allowed on the field if the guy's hurt to check on him, you're concerned about him. But the fact of the matter is the rules state you're not allowed on the field, and he was out there, and he certainly incited whatever happened, and he was not penalized for it, to the Steelers' fortune and to the Bengals' misfortune. That's how it went down. You got to be more controlled if you're the Bengals. They weren't. They were penalized. Cost them the game in the season.
Adam Schefter joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Do you think so? The league's looking in, as far as you can tell, to what was said on the field and may issue fines. Him, Munchak, other people.
Well, Joey Porter's going to be fined for what happened the other night. That I can tell you, and that'll come down here at some point this week. And I don't know the league's stance on Mike Munchak. I'm sure people have different interpretations of whether or not it was intentional, what he did, was over the line or not. I'll let the league determine that. But Joey Porter will get fined, Rich.
What's going on with Marshawn Lynch in Seattle, Adam? Where he was deemed ready to rock by Pete Carroll last week, and then apparently, as he's boarding the plane, says, "I don't think I can do this." I mean,
Very odd. I'll say this: that if you're the Seahawks going forward, I think you're hopeful that Marshawn Lynch can go play on Sunday, but I don't know how you can count on him. Okay, he had significant surgery in late November, and he made the determination that he just wasn't ready. Now, I do know that he had been probably in better shape than he had been at any point in the season. Pete Carroll said on Friday, his words, "We anticipate Marshawn playing." And I just think ultimately in the end, Marshawn Lynch didn't feel comfortable enough to go out there and play. That simple. Now, we want to read into this and attach meaning because it's Marshawn Lynch and the Seahawks and they have a long history. I just think the guy had significant surgery. He just didn't feel like he was ready in the end.
Mm-hmm. So do you think we see him out there on
Well, I would have thought we saw him last week.
Sure.
My guess would be that we see him this week.
Yes.
But I don't know that it's going to be a full-time role. People forget how dominant he's been in the postseason. I mean, this is a guy that is in the record books for some of his performances and some of his production.
Yeah, he's a 100-yard rushing machine in the playoffs.
He's unbelievable. I mean, he's not beast mode for nothing. I would guess we'll see some of him, and the quicker they get him back, the more potent they are, the more dangerous they are. He just brings a certain aura with him. Mm-hmm. And I think they'd like to get that back in the lineup and on the field on Sunday. I think they'll probably get some of it, but I don't know how you count on that guy going forward just because it was a significant injury.
Adam Schefter joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Does Tom Coughlin wind up with a job, do you think? He's interviewing with a ton of teams.
Yeah, no, he's got the 49ers today. Trent Baalke is conducting that interview for the 49ers. He's the general manager because the owners' meetings are going on, and Jed York is in Houston at that meeting. And I do think the 49ers are sufficiently intrigued with Tom Coughlin, and I do think depending on what happens there that somehow they could wind up deciding to try to move in that direction. My sense is that I don't think Philadelphia materializes in the end for Tom Coughlin. Just my read and guess into the situation. I think it's of great interest and great use for the Eagles to sit down and talk to him for the man he is, for the coach he's been, for the knowledge he has of their roster, the Giants roster, everything else. And you can gain a lot of insight speaking to him. But ultimately, in the end, I think the Eagles want to hire an offensive-minded coach, which he would qualify for, and somebody that they could build their franchise around for the next 10 to 15 years. Now, I always think that that's a little bit ridiculous because if we look at this, everybody would like to hire a coach for 10 or 15 years. And in this league outside the Steelers and Patriots and maybe the Giants, nobody does it. Nobody does it. So you can say that. So if I had a team, if you and I owned a team, Rich, which we should have bought back in college together,
yes.
We should have pooled our pizza money together and bought an NFL franchise
Correct.
somehow.
Yes.
I'd have no problem hiring Tom Coughlin today. I'd have no problem hiring Mike Shanahan. I'd want a guy that is experienced. I don't care if Tom Coughlin's 69, Mike Shanahan 63. I want the best coach, period. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that these franchises are thinking like that. I think they want somebody that they could build around, like I said, for the next dozen or so years. But who lasts that long in this league? It just doesn't happen.
No, Sean Payton's an outlier right now. That Bill Belichick is obviously the rarity in the business. And, why have we not heard Chip Kelly's name a lot? Is he going to sit this one out, do you think? Or is he just...
I don't see him getting a head coaching job this round. I don't see how that happens. Again, he's talking to teams. There'll continue to be conversations. You don't know where or how he could surface again. I just don't see him getting a head coaching job in this cycle right now.
Well, the idea that it made so much sense, Adam, that, the quarterback that he coveted because he coached him in college now has an interim head coach sitting
mm-hmm.
right there that it would have been perfect natural fit right there. But can you explain to me why Mike Mularkey is essentially what it seems to be rubber stamped there? What the Titans see in this in Mike Mularkey? Adam?
Rich, everybody thinks that Mike Mularkey's rubber stamped.
Yes.
And as of today, on January 12th, that may turn out to be the case. But let's keep in mind that by the end of the week, the Titans are going to have a new general manager. New general manager is going to have his own ideas. Mm-hmm. New general manager's new ideas, I'm going to guess, include moving ahead with his own coach. So they have interviewed so far, I believe, Mike Mularkey and Doug Marrone. I don't even know if they sat down with Doug Marrone. I know they requested him. That's it. Okay, so a very short coaching list. They've been much more focused on getting a GM. But just like in Detroit, you didn't hear much conversation about Jim Caldwell for a week, and now Bob Quinn takes over, and you begin to wonder, okay, what's Bob Quinn going to do with Jim Caldwell moving forward? And I think that there'll be a similar story in Tennessee. People assume he's getting rubber stamped because there's been such little activity at that spot. They haven't interviewed anybody, but that faces the real prospect of changing when there's a new GM in place who wants to implement his own program and ideas.
Right. And Cleveland has been fascinating with that. I mean, the Moneyball being brought to football, essentially, right here.
I don't know that enough was made of the hiring of Paul DePodesta. I think that this is a huge deal. I think they're really counting on him. I think he assumes a prominent position. Having spoken to some of the people in the Mets organization, because I like to roll like that, Rich, and reach out to all the baseball people when things like this happen.
Yes.
They love the guy. I mean, they talk about how smart this guy is and how analytical it is, and I'm sure everybody will be paying attention to see whether his analytical abilities translate over to football. I don't know why they wouldn't.
Well,
I really don't.
It would be great if Scott Hatteberg can run a professional football offense. Maybe Art Howe, if Hugh Jackson doesn't work out, is what we were saying here. And it's interesting that Jimmy Haslam's not in Houston. He's not there. His wife is representing the team down in Houston right now, and everybody believes because Jimmy Haslam wants to close a deal with Hugh Jackson.
Listen, Hugh Jackson right now has got definite interest in the Cleveland Browns. He's got interest in the San Francisco 49ers. The Giants are waiting to see whether they could fly him in to interview there. Mm-hmm. And you don't know how it's going to shake out, but it certainly looks like one of these jobs is going to belong to Hugh Jackson. I don't know which one. I don't think he knows which one right now. Mm-hmm. He's waiting to see. As I understand it, and I'll leave this to Michael Silver to update, but as of about 5 minutes ago, Hugh Jackson didn't have any offers yet.
Yeah, every time I see Silver, I'm like, I don't know. Do you know Hugh Jackson? I don't know. Can I introduce you to a guy named Hugh Jackson, Mike? Because I don't know if you guys know each other. How soon do the RG3 and Johnny Manziel stories pop in the non-playing season, Adam?
It's a great question. It's probably one of the more insignificant things that'll happen this offseason, yet it'll command headlines as if it's the most significant things that could happen this offseason. And I know there are still people who believe that Dan Snyder doesn't want to get rid of RG3 and somehow figure out a way to keep him in Washington, which I find hard to imagine. I don't know how you pay him that. It was certainly not going to pay him that. You can't pay him that. He has to be let go. He has to be maybe traded before he's cut if they can find somebody that's interested. Johnny Manziel just seems so destined for Dallas. It's amazing. That is just the most obvious fit if we ever saw one. You could see that coming a mile away. I'd be really surprised if that didn't happen.
Huh? How would it happen?
Well, Cleveland cuts him. Okay. Cleveland trades him.
They would cut him. Okay.
Well, I think I think he's probably a tradable commodity because you're looking at a guy who Jerry Jones readily admits they had ranked in the top 5 or 6 players on their draft board the year they bypassed him for Zach Martin. And if you are Jerry Jones and you want to upgrade that position and improve it, which he does, openly admits that, why would you not be willing to give up a conditional 5th-round draft pick that you could just make back in terms of maneuvering the draft and moving around the draft board? So would Cleveland take back a conditional 5th? We'll see who's making the final calls for them, along with Paul DePodesta in terms of the head coach and the vice president of player personnel. But, yeah, I think they're going to trade him. I think they get back whatever they can for him. It's going to be pennies on the dollar, and they'll take those pennies, put them in their pocket, and I think it turns out to be the Dallas Cowboys.
Huh? And so you think it's possible that Dan Snyder is trying to figure out a way to still hold on to RG3 after all this time? Because if that happens, he should just put lotion and put it in a basket. I mean, because that would be out of control.
Yeah,
if they still try to figure out a way
to say this. It would be
keep him locked
but
away.
All I'm saying is, and we'll see how it plays out. Common sense and prevailing logic is that RG3 is moving on. I think we all believe that. But Dan Snyder's affection and feelings for RG3 cannot be underestimated and dismissed from this equation. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, very good. And Nick Saban, anybody knocking on his door, you think? Last one for you. Anybody even attempting to knock on his door to see what's what?
Well, let me say this. If teams didn't do that, I think that they would be negligent.
That's what I said earlier. Of course, right? They got to knock on his door just to see if he answers it.
Of course. And, that's his life and his call and his decision and his career. But, I do think that Indianapolis might have been enticing had that been open. It's not.
Right.
So that becomes a moot point. And then there's the question: just is there another opportunity out there that is alluring enough to him that the team is willing to spend the money it takes to get him?
Right.
That we can marry up together and see if that is enough to get the deal done. My guess would be no.
Okay.
But listen, one of the great parts of what we do are the surprises that are always in store.
Listen, I love you, man. One last thing, because I don't know if we spoke briefly when I did the radio-only show from Oakland, so you could tell the Mongerer story from back in the day. The Michigan-Ohio State game, prior to that, Michigan State-Ohio State, Bob Kraft was in Columbus wearing an Ohio State pullover. What's that connection? Have you heard that? What was that all about?
Wow. You know what?
Did you see that?
I did not see that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to get to We're going to have to get to the bottom. Like,
Get into that.
If Nick Saban's going to the NFL, we got to find out why Bob Kraft is wearing that sweater.
Get into that. I'm sure his quarterback
by
was.
the way, you were talking about the baseball football thing. I should leave you with this. You'll find this interesting.
Okay.
Our good friend Grimm, Mike Connor, over at the Major League Baseball Network, when I was on the bench looking for work, he actually invited me over to be the Buster Olney of that network.
And?
It would have been interesting if ESPN hadn't come along. So I might have been the reverse Paul DePodesta going over to do baseball.
I had not heard this is breaking news. So Mike Connor used to be of the NFL Network assignment desk. As a matter of fact, when we needed to find a ukulele for Don Ho when he came by the NFL Total Access set at the Pro Bowl, he actually found one. He was a scrounger, essentially, for us.
That's what Mike Connor, I refer to him as Grim because he was always calling me to tell me that we got to sing in Indianapolis or Green Bay or Oakland or whatever it was during the holidays.
The Reaper.
Yes, okay.
He's the Reaper. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I call him, Grim.
Okay.
Yes, Grim.
So he tried to get you to MLB Network.
Try would be too strong of term.
Okay.
But he called me and said, "Look, if you're interested, we'll have you over here to be a baseball insider."
Huh.
And I mean,
you'd have been great at that too.
When I was younger,
yes,
I wanted to cover baseball. I never got the Rocky Mountain News rebuffed me for my interviews for the cover of the Colorado Rockies. I never got the chance to do that, so I was kind of stuck on the Broncos beat. It worked out that I got to stay there and live in the NFL universe and world.
You worked out it perfectly for you, Adam. Thanks.
It was good, but I'm just saying, like, there are people out there who can make that change, Rich.
Okay, there you have it. You never know. If you could have gone to MLB Network, then Paul DePodesta can bring a Lombardi Trophy to Cleveland, is basically what you're saying.
That's my point.
Exactly. There's always hope. Thanks for calling in, Adam.
Rich, Happy New Year. Some regards to the family. We'll talk to you.
Same to you. That's Adam Schefter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.